Hello and welcome to Bored and Confused, where I review shows based on two criteria. One, was I bored? Two, was I confused? Today's show is, well, I'll Let You Go, currently playing at Studio Seaview in New York City. But before I get into this new play, please like, please comment, please subscribe, please share. It helps me grow this channel. It truly means the world to me if you can help me out. And hey, if you see me at the theater, say hello. Someone did at Studio Seaview. Shout out to Jade, it was great meeting you. So what did I know about this play going in? Absolutely nothing, not a single thing. I went in completely cold, and honestly, that's probably the best way to see this one, which I will explain in a moment. So this is a new play by Bubba Weiler, and it's directed by the brilliant Jack Serio, an Obie and Drama Desk winner. Now, here's what's interesting. Bubba Weiler is primarily known as an actor. You might know him from playing Scorpius Malfoy in the original American cast of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child on Broadway, or from Swing State, for which he received a Drama Desk, a Lortel, and an Outer Critics Circle nomination as a performer. But Weiler grew up as a child actor in Chicago, spending his evenings in storefront theaters, watching directors, writers, and actors develop new work. And quietly, secretly, he started writing his own plays. He studied playwriting at NYU's Playwrights Horizons Theater School and spent time in residence at Berkeley Rep. And eventually he had, as he put it, a little stack of plays with nowhere to take them. Well, I'll Let You Go is his professional playwriting debut. It premiered last summer at the Space at Irondale in Brooklyn, a gorgeous 19th century church with peeling paint and a lot of character, and it sold out and it had to be extended. Now it's back off-Broadway at Studio Seaview, and critics have taken notice. It's a New York Times Critics pick. It's been nominated for Drama Desk and Outer Critics Circle Awards, and the Wall Street Journal called it a, quote, terrifically accomplished piece of writing, end quote. And from a first-time playwright, that's really incredible. Director Jack Serio was apparently so excited about the script, he called it the work of a playwright he'd long known was secretly skilled. The production is actor-driven and very intimate, which is by design. Now, for theater goers who love discovering new voices, Bubba Weiler is absolutely one to watch. So what is this play about? Now, I am going to choose my words very carefully because the game of this play, the entire game, is built on withholding information from the audience, and I don't want to spoil that game for you. So here's what I can tell you. It's a one act. It's about 100 minutes with no intermission. There are 8 actors. The set, designed by Frank J. Oliva, is deliberately spare. Plywood floors, folding chairs, standing in for a sectional couch, a kitchen counter, a refrigerator. It's stripped down. The script actually calls for the stage to be, quote, mostly empty, with props that feel like rehearsal versions of real objects. Representative, useful, but not quite fully realized. The minimalism is intentional and very appropriate, as I will discuss. At the center of the story is Maggie, an older woman in a small Midwestern town whose husband, Marv, has just died. His death was sudden and, let's just say, unusual, unexpected in ways that go beyond simply being unexpected. Maggie is processing her grief, receiving a series of visitors in the days that follow, friends, relatives, community members, and with each encounter, we as an audience slowly piece together what actually happened to Marv. It's almost like watching a mystery unfold, but from the inside. And it's also the story of a woman and a community in crisis, examining what's left when the American dream crumbles. Now, that's all I'm going to say about the plot. Anything more, and I'm taking something away from you, and trust me, you'll want to discover it for yourself. Let's start with the positives. First, the ensemble. Every actor on this stage feels like a real person. From the very first moment you meet any of these characters, you believe them completely. There's always something going on underneath the surface of each one of these characters, and that does an enormous amount of work drawing you into the world of the play. I was particularly delighted by Constance Schulman. She plays Joni, the funeral home representative who arrives with purple balloons. Yes, purple balloons, and yes, they appear prominently on the program and all the marketing materials. But don't let that mislead you about their importance in the show. because they're not that important, but Schulman brings a wonderful, bumbling comedy to the role. Joni is obsessively focused on carpet swatches and potpourri and absolutely determined to organize grief into a brand experience. Now, Schulman plays it with such joyful obliviousness that she's a genuine highlight. I also really enjoyed the scene midway through the play, towards the end, where things really start to crack open, where one character begins to realize that Maggie doesn't know something that almost everyone else seems to know. That is when we finally feel the dramatic tension ratchet up, and it is electrifying. The audience leans forward, and the way the playwright has engineered that moment, setting it up over the course of an entire act, shows real craft. And I want to specifically praise the playwright's technique of planting little seeds early on that pay off much later. Little details that seem like they're just establishing the world, a character's quirk, an offhand remark, a specific object. They come back later, one after another, blossoming into a full meaning. Now, the choice to keep the set bare is also exactly right. Maggie is in this fog of grief. Not only has she lost her husband, but seemingly everything around her that would help her keep her bearings. This play is not your typical living room drama. Death of a Salesman, A Raisin in the Sun, Long Day's Journey into Night. Shows that usually have realistic sets. If you put this play in a lush, realistic set, you'd be priming the audience for a family drama of a different kind entirely. So the bare stage suits the play's unusual form very well. It keeps the focus really where it needs to be. Now let's talk about some of my concerns. First, the game of withholding. I admire it. I respect what the playwright is doing, but I'll be honest, there were moments where the scenes themselves weren't quite dramatic enough to carry me through the waiting. I knew a revelation was coming, and I trusted the playwright would get us there, but in the meantime, some of the scenes weren't dynamic enough on their own terms to keep me fully engaged. One of the first scenes with Wally, played very well by Will Dagger, I should say. I believed him 100% as this character. And the scene is designed to show us how Marv took care of people. Wally is a lonely, verbose, conspiracy-spinning mailman, and it's both comic and tender, but I started to feel Maggie's frustration with him a little too acutely, and not always in the way that I think was intended. The biggest concern for me is structural. The narrator, and I'll talk about him specifically in a moment, is used in a very novelistic way. He gives us pages of exposition up front, paints pictures of scenes we can't see, and tells us things about characters that we then have to reconcile with what we are seeing in front of us. Now, I understand this is a deliberate choice. The play is presenting itself almost like a novel being read aloud, with the dialogue scenes as the dramatized chapters. And that's a really interesting formal experiment. But in a play, I would generally rather see a character's truth in their performance than be told what it is by a narrator. When the narrator describes Maggie as someone with particular qualities, and I'm watching someone so consumed by grief that those qualities aren't visible, it feels like there's a gap there. And that gap is a choice, but it's not always a comfortable one for me. And speaking of Maggie, and this is important, so listen carefully, I want to be very clear that what I'm about to describe is, I believe, fundamentally a question of what the playwright has written, not of any failure in the performance. Quincy Tyler Bernstine plays Maggie, and she has been universally celebrated for this role. She won an Obie Award for it in the original run. She is carrying this woman's grief with precision and honesty. Every choice she makes is real. But here is my issue. The playwright has immersed Maggie so completely in her grief that the grief becomes the only thing we can see. And when the narrator tells us about who Maggie is, her energy, her humor, her particular character, and then we look at this woman moving carefully through the room, bearing the full weight of loss, it's difficult to reconcile these two people. The woman described doesn't quite match the woman we are seeing. And I think that's by design. Grief does that to a person. It obscures everything else. But as an audience member, it made it harder for me to know who I was rooting for beyond knowing she deserved my compassion. Now, there's a flashback in one of the epilogues where we see Maggie roughly 30 years younger, and this is where I wanted more. I wanted a significant physical shift, a spring in her step, a brightness in her eyes, some version of this woman that the narrator has been describing to us all evening. It wasn't quite there. The change was subtle when I thought it needed to be really pronounced. And the change doesn't really come until the final scene. That's when Maggie seems to shed some of her grief, to have some lightness, to almost become 20 years younger before our very eyes. And in that moment, I finally understood something about who she was outside of her loss. And that moment was beautiful. And it made me wish I'd seen a glimpse of it earlier, especially in that first flashback. I also want to flag, and this just may be me, so tell me in the comments, there's a structural oddness at the end of the play. There's a moment when you feel the play is over, and then there's a symbolic transitional scene performed without words, and then there's a flashback scene, and then we get the final scene, which comes back to current time. And to me, it felt like there was maybe 2.5 epilogues, depending on how you count. And the later ones, they get better as you go along, and the final scene is genuinely lovely and ties everything together, and all those planted seeds come to fruition. But the cumulative effect makes it feel like the play is dragging towards its conclusion after this big revelation scene that the play had been building up to. We get there, but it is a bit of a journey. Now, I want to ask you all a quick question, which might get me in trouble, but I really want to know this. Are you ever pulled out of a play by things that seem unusual, but the play itself never addresses? For example, a narrator with a speech impediment delivering long passages of exposition, and you wonder if the actor has the impediment inherently or if it is a skillfully executed character choice. Or an interracial couple living in a small insular Midwestern town, which seems like something that might bring its own challenges in 1990, or maybe not. Or an omniscient narrator describing a character as handsome when he's being played by someone who most people would probably not describe as traditionally handsome. Am I an asshole for noticing things that any stand-up comic would lead with in their set, or any casting director would bring up the moment an actor has stepped out of the audition room? I mean, am I a bad person for wanting the obvious to be addressed so that I can relax and say, okay, it's a purposeful choice? Or is this a result of consuming a lifetime of media that alters our perceptions and causes damaging and unrealistic expectations? Sometimes these little snags catch me and they pull me out of a play. And I want to know, is it just me? Maybe. Please let me know in the comments if any of this resonates with you. Okay, was I bored? A little. Yes, I'll be honest with you. I was a little bored. And here's the thing. I appreciate the game the playwright is playing. I appreciate the skill of it. But the scenes in between the revelations weren't always exciting enough to carry me through the waiting for the answer to this big question. When the mystery is all you have to hold on to, and the scenes themselves aren't generating their own dramatic energy, I started to feel the time. The play was most alive in 2 moments. The scene when the funeral planner, Joni, because her agenda is her own and she cuts through the heaviness with comedy, and the scene where the final piece of information, the final shoe drops, because by that point, I was practically standing up in my chair, just willing the playwright to just tell me. And that anticipation, that tension of finally getting this answer, that was genuinely exciting. But there were stretches in between where I was patient rather than captivated. And patient is not the same as engaged. So was I confused? Also, yes. But interestingly, the confusion I experienced was more about the characters than the plot. The play keeps you deliberately in the dark about the plot, so I'm not confused there. That's clearly intentional. But I found myself confused about who Maggie was as a person, as a woman, as a specific human being outside of her grief. Now, I've touched on this already, but it's worth restating. When all you can see is someone's grief, that grief becomes their only defining quality. And a person defined entirely by grief is someone I feel for, but it's someone I struggle to fully know and root for. I was also confused about the characters' ages at various points. Maggie seems to be one age, but I don't know if it's her grief that's really aging her. But some of the relationships described around her suggest another. Characters I expected to be roughly her contemporaries seemed younger or older than I'd imagined. And then the flashback I mentioned, when we see a younger Maggie, I needed to see a significantly different person. Not just a marginally brighter version of this grieving woman, still shuffling her feet. I needed the contrast to land. Without it, the flashback reads more of the same, and I wasn't sure what it was telling me. But most of all, the narrator describing characters in ways that don't quite match what I see in front of me. Am I supposed to question the narrator's reliability? Am I supposed to see what he sees? Am I simply supposed to accept the gap? I honestly don't know. And when I'm genuinely unsure whether my confusion is the point or the problem, that kind of sticks with me. So let me wrap this up. Well, I'll Let You Go is a genuinely interesting play. Watching it, I had the sense of seeing something new and unusual, something that is trying to do a specific thing in a very specific way and mostly succeeding at it. It's rare to go to a play and feel like you're watching a form being experimented with. This playwright is reaching for something interesting. The comparison that kept coming to me was the film About Schmidt, the 2002 Jack Nicholson film directed by Alexander Payne, where a man's wife dies and he moves through the world in a kind of daze while the truth of his marriage gradually reveals itself to him. That same quality of slow revelation of grief mixed with the unraveling of a story we thought we knew, it's a very similar emotional landscape. And the bare stage is completely right for this play. If you dress this play up in an elaborate, realistic set, you'd be making a promise the play isn't prepared to keep. The emptiness really suits it. The emptiness is, in some ways, the point. So I'm glad I got to see it even when it frustrated me. It was the kind of frustration that comes from caring, from wanting more, from feeling like the ingredients for something extraordinary were all present and accounted for, but still wanting a little bit more. So who should see Well, I'll Let You Go? If you love theater that peels back the onion slowly, that treats the audience as intelligent participants in a mystery, this is going to give you everything you need. If you love plays about grief, about the way loss distorts reality and relationships, about small town America in quiet crisis, you're going to really enjoy this play. It's also a must-see if you're interested in watching a genuinely exciting new playwright finding their voice. Bubba Weiler is a name you want to know. This is a New York Times Critics pick. It's been nominated for Drama Desk and Outer Critics Circle Awards, and the critical consensus is that this is a tender, surprisingly beautifully written debut. I'll also say this, if you've ever lost someone and felt like grief swallowed everything that person used to be and wondered how anyone could ever find their way back, this play will resonate with you very deeply. It did with audiences in the original run. People left the theater in tears. So this is not a comedy. It is a drama. It is a mystery, but it also has moments of real surprising warmth and humor scattered throughout, which makes the weight of it more bearable. I was so fortunate to attend this show on a press ticket, so huge thank you for that. Now, seating. There is really not a bad seat in this theater. However, I do want to mention that they've placed some audience seating on the sides of the stage itself. You're actually up on the stage with the actors. And while that's a thrilling idea in theory, in practice, there is a moment involving a trolley and also a moment involving a wheelbarrow full of mulch that made me genuinely nervous for some nearby kneecaps. So if you want to be up close and very personal, those onstage seats are available. But if I'm being honest, I think the conventional seating gives you a better view of the full picture. And that's where I sat, about 5 rows back, had a great seat. So tickets for Well, I'll Let You Go start at $52 and are available at letyougonyc.com. The show runs at Studio Seaview, 305 West 43rd Street through June 20th, 2026. So you have a few weeks to catch this. The show is just opening, so I don't know about discount tickets yet. I will add them to the video description when they become available. All right, that is my review for Well, I'll Let You Go. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your enemies, and I will see you at the next one.
Don't wanna drift away, wanna stay inside the play. Keep me engaged, keep me amused. what's in front of me, 'cause I don't